So thank you all for coming to my session on building better readers using social studies. So my name is Linda Burrows, for those of you that don't know me, and I am the K-12 Social Studies and World Language Specialist here at the Department of Ed. And let me go ahead and get started here. So Tempe has some session norms that they want you guys to abide by. One is having your video on, muting your mic. We're a smaller group, so please feel free to unmute yourselves and chime in at any point in time, interrupt me, ask questions. While we're doing that too, if you could introduce yourself to me in the chat, so I get to know some of you I know because I did teach in Tempe for a while. Some of you I don't know and are new to me. So tell me your name, your school, and then what subject you teach. And while you are doing that, I'm going to go ahead and go to our agenda. So today we really have 2.5, 3 tasks that we're going to be doing. First is examining what and understanding what reading strategies are and why they're needed. Why do we as social studies teachers need to think of ourselves as reading teachers as well? And then we'll also the bulk of the time will be spent looking and examining reading strategies that I feel work very well in a social studies classroom. I've used most of these strategies myself over the course of my teaching career. And with that, I have a ton of them. Some of them you may have seen before and are familiar with. Some of them are new to you. So we're going to go through a bunch of them. And my idea is to give you just a real smattering of things, to little taste of a bunch of different things. So that way, after the fact, you can go back into your classrooms and pull what you need. And then lastly, while I'm doing this, I want you guys to be brainstorming. And I have a Jamboard that you'll be using that you can start putting down reading strategies that work for upcoming units and different things that you may use and primary sources that you can use in your classroom. So with that, we're going to start with the research of what reading strategies are and why they are. So I have a Jamboard here. Let me pull this up and I will put it into the chat. I can go ahead and pull up my timer as well. There we go. Let me stick this in the chat for you guys. There you go. So go ahead and click on that link. If it doesn't work, if you click directly on it, you may need to copy and paste it out of the link, and that's fine. But I just want to kind of see where you guys are coming from with regard to reading strategies. So if you can just take a minute, if you're unfamiliar with Jamboard, this is the toolbar on the left-hand side. You can click the 4th one down, which is a sticky note. You can type your answer in here, and then it will show up on the screen. And just tell me, what do you think when I say the term reading strategies? What does that mean? So I'm going to move this over and make it a little bit bigger because my eyes with my bifocals don't work quite as well as they used to. Great strategies to allow students to succeed at the most important thing. Yep, they need to learn to read. Very true. Let's see, let's move this one over here. How students access text, vocabulary content. Wonderful. Let's see. Thank you for making that bigger, whoever just did that. Sharing and developing. Understanding the process that helps students comprehend the text. Perfect. Close reading. Yep. Yeah, so a lot of these you probably already do. And so this really is a good reminder to, hey, keep up the good work, right? But also to give you some new strategies that I have found have been very successful with my kids, especially kids that are struggling readers, or we all have those readers that, you know, are below grade level, right? They're not reading with us at high school. Wonderful. Process the unfamiliar text. I like that one. That's fantastic. All right, I'm going to go back to the session. So reading strategies, as far as just a generic kind of definition, are the skills and activities that readers use to gain meaning from a text. And when I say a text, I'm referring to any kind of document, picture, image, art, oral recording, sound recording, video clip, right? It can be any type of text that we use. And it can also be implicit and explicit as well. So it's really anything we're doing to help our kids understand what we're wanting them to learn in their classes. So why should we be concerned about reading as social studies teachers? I know I never really thought of myself as a reading teacher when I was in the classroom, but we really are when you think about it. So I have a little activity here from Judith Lanier from Michigan State University. So I have a text for you. It says, it's very important that you learn about Traxylene. Traxylene is a new form of Zianter. It is monotilled in Serostana. The Serostanians gristillate large amounts of Fevon, then bracter it to quasal Traxylene. Traxylene may well be one of our most Leuci sneeze loss in the future because of our Zianter lessilage. So now that we've read that little section, little reading comprehension test, and you can just type this into the chat for me. What is Traxylene? Perfect, a new form of Zianter. Any other answers? That happens to be correct, so good job. So Traxylene is a new form of Zianter. If you guys all guessed that, then you are 1 for 1. Let's go to question number 2. Where is Traxylene montilled? Perfect, Serostana, excellent. 2 for 2, you guys are excellent so far. Question number 3, how is Traxylene quaseled? Good, using large amounts of Fevon, excellent. Any other ways in which Traxylene is quaseled? Good, we bracter it, yep, then we quasel it, yep. Fantastic. You guys are amazing, this is awesome. So 3 for 3 on our reading comprehension test. So question number 4, and this is the last one, I promise. Why is it important to know about Traxylene? Perfect, right? It is our Zianter lessilage. It's the future, right? It's one of the most Leuci sneeze loss. So you guys got 4 for 4 on your reading comprehension, right? But do any of you have any idea what on earth we're talking about? No, right? And it is rubbish, right? There is no such thing as Traxylene. However, it's the point that if you don't know the background knowledge of, if the students don't know the background knowledge of what they're reading, they may guess the right answers because they're so programmed into answering multiple choice questions, but to truly understand what they're reading, they need reading strategies. And that's where we come in as social studies teachers more than anything else, which leads me to the research. So these are a bunch of recent research studies that talk about how content counts, right? The research shows that the background knowledge that we as social studies teachers are giving our students actually increase the reading scores, especially for English language learners. Intervening with this reading and social studies and science definitely helps that with that comprehension. There are examples, and I've got them linked here with Project Place and some of the science of reading comprehension instruction, which really go into more details. But the research keeps showing time and time again that reading and social studies go hand in hand, and it really is actually the social studies that is the key to reading success more than anything else, which gets me to my last piece of research here, which is the Fordham study. Now, the study is based on elementary students. However, it does, and there's no reason why it shouldn't parlay into with high school students, that more time spent on social studies actually had a greater impact on increasing reading scores of students than increased time on any other subject. So if we want our students to do well on the ACT test or any other standardized test, the key is social studies content and reading in the social studies. My favorite part of this, especially having taught, at a Title I kind of school, is where the fourth item where students who benefited the most from more time on social studies and specific reading time in social studies are girls from lower income schools and non-English speaking students. So that gives you a little bit of a background of the why. So now let's get to the meat of it, right? What we're here for, our reading strategies. And like I said, some of these strategies you have done before. So this is a good reminder to, hey, keep doing the good work. Some of them may be strategies that you haven't done in a while. So it's a good reminder to kind of pull that one back out of your toolbox and kind of integrate it into your repertoire and how you're doing your reading. And then some of these may be brand new. So how I have this set up is I have a separate Jamboard with each content area having its own slide. So let me pull this up for you and give you this link here. Let's see, copy, let's paste it here. So when you get into this Jamboard, you'll see you have a slide already as a background. If you come up to the top of it here, there's a rectangle. And if you click the over arrow, you should be able to find different content areas that you teach in, because it's going to be different whether you're teaching world history, US history, government, I've got econ, and then lastly, I've got some electives here as well. So I want you to keep this Jamboard up as we're going through this and have it pulled up to the side, the content area that you teach the most in, or you feel like you need to work the most with reading strategies. Again, as a reminder, here is the sticky note that you can add items to it. And we're going to be focusing on the reading strategy and then how you can use this reading strategy in class and with what source. So that way you have a resource that you can go back to, that you can cooperate with teachers across your district to say, oh, here's a primary source. This is how I think this reading strategy may work with it, or this is how I've used it, or I'm confused. So this is an open kind of forum for you guys to use as we're going through the training today. So I have 17 strategies, and it, like I said, it is a lot, but I want to give you a lot to choose from so that way you can take and pick what works best for you, because we all have our teaching strengths. And I want you to use what strategies you feel the most comfortable with going forward. So first one is called word picture. So this is a US, I picked a US kind of document that I figure you would probably be using in the near future. So this is a Civil Rights Act of 1964. And I'm actually going to have you do this as if you're students. So I want you to take a minute and read the selection carefully. And as you are reading the selection, I want you to look for vivid and expressive words that help describe the topic. So if you think Civil Rights Act of 1964, the kids are going to have certain images and things in their head already. How do those words and images emphasize the main point? So this is what I would like for you to do. Just take a minute, read it. And when you find an expressive word, I want you to type it into the chat for me. Enjoyment. Perfect. Yeah, you both are thinking the same exact thing. Equal enjoyment. Transient. Wonderful. Yeah, these are all words that your kids are going to, one, maybe not be sure of, but it can also help understand the document by taking the time to look at the actual pictures that are, or words, excuse me, that are kind of creating a mental picture in their head. And so that's what we want to do with this particular strategy. It's not a really long and in-depth one, but it is one that can be very helpful and useful to your kids, because it will be a time that you can have either them talk to each other or you can talk as a whole group setting to describe some of these words that are really giving a visual image to it. Fantastic. All right. Next one I have is pulling quotes. So this would be a world resource for you guys. So this is actually an excerpt from, or it's not an excerpt, it actually is the Munich Pact that was signed in 1938. I do have it hyperlinked for you, so you will receive this in a Padlet that you can go out to it. So I want you to take this time too. I'm going to have you go ahead and read this. After you read it, I want you to identify a significant statement from the text that you want to pull. And you're not going to write it, but then you would have your students write a short statement to justify why that particular quote was selected and its significance. So take a minute to read the text. And if you want to just put the number in the chat, that works well instead of having to type it all out. Perfect. So as you look through this, Allie, why did you pick number 4? If you want to unmute yourself.
Trying to remember how to do all this. I picked 4 because it goes into the specifics. So they will begin on October 1st. The 4 territories marked will be occupied by troops in the following order. And so I think it does more to explain what 1, 2, and 3 are setting up.
Perfect. Excellent. Trisha, you picked 8. Why 8?
I picked that one because it kind of wrapped it up in knowing that the Sudetenland was taken and the Czech government would have a period to release any prisoners that they had. It just kind of, I don't know, I felt like it did a good job at like stating what would happen in Czechoslovakia at the end.
Yep. Wonderful. So this is exactly what you're going to do with your kids, right? Have them read a selection and then just pull a quote that they think is the, most important quote about that document, but then justify it. And the wonderful thing about doing that is that hits so many of our disciplinary skills and processes standards, in addition to some of those content standards, right? We want kids to make a statement and back it up with evidence from what they're thinking. And so that works perfectly. And you're killing many, standards with just, one activity, which is all about working smarter, not harder. All right, I do have another US one. So this is Japanese American incarceration. So this is an excerpt from the Munson report that was given to FDR in 1941. And this activity is called action verbs and synonyms. So this is just a piece of the Munson report. The Munson report was actually more like a couple of pages. So in your reading strategies, one of the things I wanted to point out by example here is that you can take excerpts of documents, of pictures, or whatever it is that you're doing, of recordings, and only use pieces of it, especially helping with those struggling readers. So in this one talks about what the Japanese will do. It's talking with regards to sabotage. and you'll have your kids highlight words in the selection that are action words. So again, I'm going to have you do this one as well. So as you read through this, what are some action words that you think stand out to you with regards to that your students are going to find as they would read this themselves? Yeah, armed uprising is a good one. Those bringing in results. Yep. Yeah, sabotage and surveillance were the ones that stood out to me. What I find with this document, especially too, with regards to the time frame, that this was actually given to FDR before Pearl Harbor even happened, that they were already concerned about the Japanese. And so there's a lot that you can do with it. But again, you only have to do just an excerpt of this, but it gives you that idea of, you know, having your students read the document, understanding the document by figuring out, okay, what are the actions here? And in this case, Munson saying, hey, there really isn't a problem with the Japanese, advocating that we don't need to do incarceration camps. So it's a very different point of view, again, hitting multiple perspectives, all part of our standards, just in one, you know, in one document, right? So this one I'm not going to have you guys do, but here's a government example. So this is Article 1 from the US Constitution. And again, it's just Section 2. And so this is reading with a pencil, which ultimately is a close read. So we've all done that. We all have our ways of doing it that work best for us. So use whatever works best for you. Personally, how I did it was I would always have my kids read a section cold, pencils down, just read through it. I want them to just get the gist, main idea of the selection of whatever text they happen to be reading. After that, then I would have them get into the text with a pencil or pen, and that's when they're starting to mark it up. They're going to look for patterns. This is where they do their analysis, their annotation. Maybe I have them circle vocabulary words, writing in the margins, underlining main ideas. You can have them highlight bias, maybe bracket something that has to do with the source. The idea of looking for text repetitions, maybe contradictions or similarities, and then what they noticed and why. So reading with a pencil is just having kids get in, do the work of historians, do the work of political scientists or economists, whatever it is, but actually marking up the text. And so this is a familiar one that if you're doing it already, fantastic. Don't stop doing it. It's a good one. This is one that I like called wrecking the text. And so after your kids have read it, what you have them do is basically wreck the text by rewriting the selection. So if you had to rewrite Article 1, Section 2, how would your students rewrite it? And in doing that, what that really shows is demonstrates how well the students understand the document or the text by being able to rewrite it. And so this is another one that is a little different from just a cold read or annotation, but you're actually having the kids rewrite it in their own words. Okay, so I'm just going to take a little bit of a 2-minute Jamboard check, and I'll put the link back into the Jamboard to give you minutes that if you haven't taken a minute to go into the Jamboard and jot down some things on your particular slide. Oh, perfect. I love the vivid expression, significant statement for world history. Awesome. I don't know if we have any US teachers. Yeah. Excellent. So I'm just going to give you a couple of minutes to process this because I've been going, you know, kind of fast. So go ahead and take a couple minutes. Just going to give you a couple of seconds more to kind of finish up your thought on the Jamboard, and then we'll get back to more reading strategies. All right, let's see some more. So this is one, here's an economics, or you could use this for Gov, looking at perspective, point of view, and again, making sure that our kids are citing the evidence of where they're getting it from. So with this one, you have students read through a primary or secondary source using some of those close reading techniques. But really the point of this activity is to focus really on that author. Who is writing or creating this document or text or piece of work that we're looking at, and examining that point of view thoroughly. You want them to find evidence within the source to support that example. Again, so we're hitting a lot of those disciplinary skills and processes standards. This can be done with any kind of text. You can do it with art to visit, what is an artist? Where are they coming from? What time period in which they live in? Why are they creating this piece of art? I very often will use Guernica as, that kind of interim period to teach it. And that's a great thing to look at. Well, who was Pablo Picasso, right? Where is he coming from in creating this? And so this goes also along with our media literacy, right? It can be done with any text, political cartoons. So here you got Gary Markson, who said, this should be enough money to buy that new car, talking about inflation, right? So we can use this for economics. And Gary Markson was actually an artist for the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel and previously for the Tribune newspaper in Arizona. So he's local. But again, asking our students, why did the author write this piece, and what was maybe the structure of this, doing a compare and contrast, connecting to emotions, especially with political cartoons, which are great to use, right? Connecting with those emotions, not only as a community as a whole, but also with the students themselves too. And I see a spelling error, so I need to fix that one. All right, next strategy. Irony, paradox, and point of view, right? Again, so this is more with point of view of the author, but sometimes you have this great idea of using a good quote. And paradox and point of view can be wonderful when you're pointing out that an author's intentional use of a language is done to merely express the opposite effect. I will say with this is one that probably as an adult, as the teacher, right, you're going to have to point this out to the kids because they may not get it. But these are a couple of examples that I found. So one from US history, Thomas Paine and Common Sense, right? Government, even in its best state, is but a necessary evil. And then another kind of ironic quote from Voltaire, talking how it is forbidden to kill, therefore all murderers are punished unless they kill in large numbers, and it's to the sound of trumpets. So really kind of an interesting quote to look about war, and is it important, and how it gets justified and maybe glorified, but really interesting quote. And again, using that with your students and maybe being a little bit more explicit in pointing out some of those more ironic quotes that you may find. Some reading strategies too that you can do with kids, especially getting to vocabulary. So I wanted to lump a bunch of things together that I've done and used and found even new things that were new to me in doing the research for this training. I liked this one with survival words, where you create a chart where your students maybe come up with vocabulary words, or maybe you have vocabulary words from a text or image that you're working on, and you write the vocabulary words down, and then the students actually self-assess themselves to say, yes, I've never seen this word, so they check it in an A. B, I've seen the word, but I don't use it. C, I know the meaning of the word, but I don't use it. Or D, I know the meaning of the word and I do use it. And then actually then writing out the meaning of those words. So I like this one because this gives kind of some of that agency to the student to really look at where do they fall with regards to these vocabulary words and creating this chart. Another good one is doing a word investigation. And I found this to be really helpful when I had those co-taught classes where I had a handful of kids with a 3rd grade reading level in my sophomore world history class. I would pair them with another partner that was a good reader, and they're doing word investigations where they have to go into a text and find a vocabulary word and figure out what's the meaning using just the context clues. So they can't use a dictionary. They have to just use the text itself, but they're doing this together as if they're detectives. And then research that meaning and then use it again in their own words in a separate sentence. And so I've found that one to be really, really helpful. Yeah, Frere models are another good one that are fantastic, right? Because it gets the class progress. You're right, Dylan, it's fantastic. So you can put the term in the middle, and really you could do this with any concept of Frere model. And you've got different boxes where you've got definitions, examples, non-examples. So you get some of that counter thinking going with it. Frere models are good. Word association is another one that if you think of a vocabulary word, well, what might be a synonym for it? And then the Kim strategy, which is also a fun one to use, where I've got the picture here in the bottom right-hand corner, where you've got the main idea, drought, right? You have the information, what it means, what the definition is, but then you also make the students draw a picture tied to that word. So that way, again, it's hitting a different part of the brain, a different element of helping them remember it by having them actually draw out a meaning. What does drought look like in a picture? How would you draw a drought in a picture? And then lastly, I wanted to give you this link to the Georgia Department of Education. So they have gone out and have 2 pages of vocabulary and vernacular tips and tricks geared just for high school students. So when you get the Padlet with this presentation that has the PDF in it, you'll have this hyperlink that you can go out and get even more vocabulary tips from them. It was really a big find that I happened upon. And then identifying bias and propaganda. So we've already talked a little bit about point of view, but we want our kids with regards to both, and this gets a little bit off topic of reading strategies, but both as they read strategies and as they produce works. And so this comes from a media literacy training that I did with the secondary ELA specialist here at ADE. And it really, we want our kids, when we're identifying bias and propaganda, to look at five concepts. First, with authorship, right? Who's creating the message? But then as they create their own content, whether that's on TikTok or Instagram or whatever, they have a part of that too, right? Of their own bias and their own point of view. Looking at the format, what creative techniques are used. And then again, when they create those messages, what are they doing to create those messages? Looking at the audience, the actual content of what they are reading and what's being included and not included, and then the purpose. What is the purpose of the item that they are analyzing? And then again, when they are the creators of content, what is their purpose that they're doing in creating or sharing different kinds of things? And this all gets to media literacy, which is very much embedded in our standards as well. I also like some of the extended questions that we have, and specifically just to point out these 2 at the bottom, which are my personal 2 favorites when we look at identifying bias and propaganda. What is omitted from the message? Which I always love to get kids to think about that. What is not being said here that could? And then whose point of view is being presented? And I think, again, it makes kids think in a little bit of a different way as they're examining different reading strategies. And even with their textbooks, right? Whose point of view is being presented in this textbook that we're reading if you're taking excerpts out of it? So I think that's always an important thing to look at. This hyperlink up here is to the actual training that we did. And then I also have included the slide deck for you in with this slide deck when I give you the Padlet at the end of the training. Relationships. So this is all about graphic organizers. And again, you can get online. You probably use some of these already, maybe just use them with a little bit of a tweak. We've all done Venn diagrams, but you can add this extra bit of critical thinking, like having kids write summaries and analyze, okay, well, what about all of these similarities and differences that we see in a Venn diagram? You've got your basic T-chart, a timeline or chronology. You've got kind of a flow chart of processes that help kids understand what's going on in a document. If that's the case, cause and effect is another one. And then I wanted to show this to you as well. This is Harvard's Project Zero critical thinking toolbox that they've got. And they have just, again, like that Georgia link that has a ton of vocabulary items for you to go out here. This also has a lot out here. So they've got core thinking routines, and all of these work well for analyzing reading strategies, reading passages, texts that kids may find difficult. What makes you think that? All different kinds. So if you click out here, digging deeper into ideas like red light, yellow light, you come out here and then you click the download and it pops it up. And again, these are all free to use. Says how you're going to have the kids do this. What's the purpose of this activity? How can you apply it in your classrooms? And so as a resource, the Project Zero has got a lot of neat things to maybe try and do with regards to your students and different texts that they may read in class. Okay, I've been yammering on for a little bit, so I'm going to give you guys again another couple minutes to really just jot down your thoughts of what are you thinking with regards to some of these different reading strategies that we've gone over. We're a little more than halfway done with all the ones that I've wanted to focus on today. All right, let's go ahead and continue on. So here's another one for historical perspective. So this I like because one, it taps into some of the students' prior knowledge, which I find to be really helpful because sometimes kids, maybe there's some video game that they played that they got really into the history of it, or there's some book that they read or some movie, and it just gets them thinking about that kind of thing. And so it's using this acronym called LINK, and you really give it to the kids before. So you start with listing, and you have the students just list for like 3 minutes, everything, ideas, words, phrases, anything that's associated with a topic with regards to what you're going to be going over. So you haven't even given them the document or the text yet. Then you have them look at each other's ideas and then respond to questions, compiling kind of a class list of questions. So this is great to maybe write on your whiteboard of like, hey, here are some questions about this topic that we're going to go over. So it's a little bit of like pre-reading kind of activities that you're doing with them. Next, you have the kids actually look through the document. And so you can have them read the document. You could do a cold read. A couple of examples I wanted to show you just as some easy prep ones are, this is the observe, reflect question, which comes from the Library of Congress. And this all helps with primary analysis tools if you're unfamiliar with it. What I like about these is they've got ready to go items for any kind of primary source you can think of, from a picture to a map to a photograph. And you can just click on this here, and it gives you questions that you can prompt your kids with, or you can have your kids do this of, what do you observe first? Then having them reflect, what do you think was the audience for this? Again, getting into some point of view bias. And then asking, what do you wonder about going forward? So Library of Congress has got these for all of these different types of primary sources. Personally, I kind of like the National Archives ones a little bit better. And it's essentially the exact same thing as the Library of Congress. The thing I like about the ones here, two things. One, they've got them here for intermediate or secondary high school students. But again, when you get those kids that are reading at a third grade level in your sophomore world history class, I would print out and give them this one, which has a lower vocab threshold. So it's a lower Lexile level. It's a little bit more user-friendly for, again, lower reading levels. But what's nice is it's exactly the same as this, but just done a little bit different format. And so it's nice for those kids that are your struggling readers that you can give them essentially the same worksheet, right? But it's geared more for them. And another thing with the library, with the National Archives, they have them in Spanish. So if you have a student that's an ELL kid, why not give them the worksheet in Spanish if that's their primary language, and help them out in understanding this document that they're reading not in their native language. So that's always something that I figure it can be a help for our kids too. So those are the National Archives ones. After you have them analyze the document, then you can actually go through the know part and ask the students to reflect on how their thinking has changed, looking back at those earlier questions that you came up with or listed as a whole class. And you can review those. You could also do this in, say, a small group setting, like maybe you're doing this in groups of 4, and you could have kids gallery walk and answer the questions around, or do this on different kinds of I went and had like those whiteboards that were cut. You could do big whiteboards, you could do small whiteboards, and really just get some good discussions about what's going on with this. So that's one of them. Summarizing, again, this is something that most of us probably already do, but it's a good thing to kind of remember, hey, this is important to have kids do. I like this to rewrite those main ideas again in their own words, getting sure that students really understand what they're doing. And so this is a document from Ruth Bader Ginsburg on the need for the Equal Rights Amendment. Again, you don't need to do the whole document. I think this document is 6 or 7 pages long. Pick an excerpt of it and just hit that part of what Ruth Bader Ginsburg did. Another thing that I like about this is that this can be oral or written. It doesn't have to necessarily be summarizing just by writing. You can have kids talk and speak. And I find a lot of these kinds of activities work really well when doing Socratic seminars or small group kind of in and outer circles with kids, that you can get some of that summarizing with that. Next one is contextualizing. So this is where we're asking students to locate a document in time and place and understand its content. So for this primary source, I found a photo of the Great Wall of China taken in 1907. And so it's really interesting. Obviously, world history, we're not teaching, the Qin and Han and when the Great Wall was built, but it obviously does have a piece and culturally too of who and what defines Chinese today. So when you're thinking at the collapse of the Qing dynasty, what did the wall have any, place in it? And looking at this picture, you can see like the wall obviously has got weeds growing on it. You've got people in their traditional Qing, like the men wearing the Q haircut that was required at the time. So there's a lot that you can go to is like, what's going on in China that the Great Wall is now looks like it's deteriorating, right? What was different? What was the same? How does this match with pictures of what kids think of with the Great Wall? So contextualizing and putting our documents, putting our images in a bigger context is really important for kids understanding, honestly, the world in which we live in. I mean, I loved teaching Rome and Han China. Like, I love that stuff, right? And it killed me to have to give it up, but it doesn't really matter today. I hate to say it. as far as like, you know, how does that play in who the Chinese are? And so that's what we have to kind of remember. The other thing I wanted to point out for you as a source, looking at contextualization, is Chronicling America. If you're not familiar with this would be great for Gov, econ, US history, maybe a little bit of world history. But essentially, this is again through the Library of Congress. It is every newspaper that they could possibly digitize from 1777 to 1963. So you can come in here and you can narrow it by years if you want. You can also say, if you just want to do, I don't know, say civil rights movement, because this is actually what I just did last, and I want to focus just on Arizona, right, to bring in more Arizona history. You can do a search and it will bring in all these digitized newspapers from, you know, that have to deal with kind of civil rights. But what I like about it, a couple different things. When you click on this newspaper, one, this shows context. If we think, you know, hey, not everybody was all hyped up about the civil rights movement, well, why not? What else is going on in America and people's lives that maybe the civil rights movement wasn't first and foremost on their mind? Okay, so that gives it also gives a lot of local context to what's going on, the advertisements for it. And what's nice too is you can actually come in here and again talk about just doing an excerpt. You can come in here and just clip part of the newspaper that you want to do. And that's what's nice about it as well, is that it gives you that feature to do it. You can save it as a PDF or text, lots of options for you to bring in some of that context of what else is going on, you know, at least with regards to America in the time period. So that's a good thing to, again, help our students understand their documents when they can see that bigger picture. Next one is inferring. So this is one, a geography. I have a USGS map of Phoenix in 1914. And so this gives students, we want them to use this to find that reason, background, making educated guesses about the text. And they can use the strategy at any time with reading any kind of text. So with this text, in this case, I'm using a map. You could do it as a pre-reading activity. You could use it as a during activity. Look at different, you know, what do you infer from this? So real quick, when we look at this map, and I'll have you type in the chat, because I've been, what do you think of, what do you infer from looking at this map, thinking of Phoenix in 1914? And you can just type your answer into the chat for me. Yes, it's definitely easy as you know, like my children were driving around, you know, it's like, okay, if you know the mountains and you can find north and south, it's a grid. So just keep going until you find a street you're familiar with, and then you're good. Yeah, Eric, I was the same, the Salt River Mountains. I had no idea South Mountain was originally called Salt River Mountains, at least at the beginning of Phoenix. So I'm curious, like, when did that take place that it became South Mountain? Built for limited cars. Small grid, yep. Notice how small Phoenix is. It doesn't even touch the, you know, the river. So there's a lot that we can infer from this. And this is a great way to kind of introduce things to documents and text to our kids. Monitoring is a good one, and we all monitor and adjust. That's kind of who we are as teachers, but think of it from your student's point of view. So this is something where instead of you monitoring, have the kids monitor. And again, I mean, you're constantly learning as a teacher. Nobody knows everything about their subject. There's always stuff that you're having to learn and think of new things. And your kids can feel that same way too, right? So having students recognize that they don't recognize part of a text, and that's okay. They can check their assumptions, look at reflection, asking clarifying questions as they're going through this. Rereading things. How many times have we as adults read something and then had to go back and reread it? I mean, I just did my son's taxes the other day and I'm like, wait, what is this exactly asking me? And I had to like read it 3 times before I figured out how to do it. So looking for answers, getting additional evidence elsewhere, and then again, adjusting the learning. So that way we know that our kids are understanding the materials. Let's see, we've got less than 10 minutes. So I'm going to skip this Jamboard check here. and go on to cooperating. So this is an economics example that I have that I did when I talked about the Fair Housing Act. It would also work with US or Gov. But we want kids to consider details across multiple sources, right? Determining points of agreement, what do other documents say? So here I have a graph from an American community survey from the Urban Institute that shows disparities in home ownership between whites and blacks in 4 major markets. And so this would be maybe after we read the Fair Housing Act or Civil Rights Act of, 1968. So in this case, right, what do other documents say? So then I have a graph from the Federal Reserve Bank in St. Louis that shows the average homeowner's net equity. So when you look at both of these graphs today, do they corroborate each other? What do other documents say? And then the kids have a better idea of how to answer, was the Fair Housing Act, was it fair? Because has it really made that intended difference of improving, minority home ownership? So great activity, again, using graphs and charts as texts is perfect things to help understand documents and reading that maybe kids who are more visual can see things in a graph better than they could maybe in a document. This is an activity where basically you take everything that we've done from summarizing, contextualizing, inferring, monitoring, and going forward to really put it all together as one piece. So you could get really in depth with a particular document, maybe a more difficult document, asking your kids what kind of sourcing, what does the source tell us, doing that contextualization and summarization, inferring and looking for biases, monitoring their own learning, and are they really getting and understanding the piece of it? And then lastly, corroborating what it is. So I am going to give you guys just like one last kind of final Jamboard check to write down anything, because we've got about 2 minutes left of what you've got. And as you are doing that, I do have the bibliography here of the research and the different places that I've gone to find information for this training for you. And then TempeUnion does want you to, so for attendance purposes, I want to make sure that you guys do this because you'll have to either scan this or let me put this URL into the chat for you as well if you don't have your, let's do this here. So there's your Google Doc for your attendance sheet, or you can just scan it and do that there. And then with 1 minute to spare, I do have a lasting thought for you, which is to train your students to conquer difficult texts rather than avoid them, find short excerpts and go deep. And that's from Dr. Erin Willis. And again, there's a QR code with the Padlet resources. Let me go ahead and I will copy this for you. Put this into the chat. There you go. So I've got the media literacy. I'll put the Jamboards up here. I've got links to our website and resources for you. And then with that, I just want to say thank you so much for being such a great participants and engaging with me today. And please feel free to reach out for any reason. Let me put my email into the chat. I teach teachers now, so that's my job. And I am more than happy to help if you've got a subject that you're having a difficulty finding something on or doing something with it, and I need to just kind of run this by someone else, let me know. And thank you so much and have a great afternoon. I'm going to go ahead and